Good morning and welcome to JChats with Bender JCC CEO Josh Bender. Josh's guest today is Gil Preuss, Chief Executive Officer of the Jewish Federation of Greater Washington.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to JChats. Hope that you had a good Passover or Easter or good spring holidays in general. It's so good to be back here after a little bit of a break from JChats. So we have a guest this morning, Gil Preuss, Chief Executive Officer of the Jewish Federation of Greater Washington. Gil, good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you, Josh.
Hope you had a good holiday and you're rejuvenated from Passover.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was nice to have some of a break and to be able to gather together in various forms.
Yes, and that's obviously year two of Passover in various forms, right?
Right.
Pandemic. Well, thanks for joining me. Looking forward to our conversation today. We always like to start off JChats with sort of getting to know our guest a little bit on a personal level. And why don't we start this morning? Tell us a little bit about your background, how you came to your role, your current role, and sort of how you came to the field, and a little bit about yourself.
So thank you. So there's actually something that you probably don't know either. I grew up going to the Bender JCC. I lived, my family lived in Old Farm on Montrose, right off of Montrose. And as a high school student, I came to the JCC. I'm not sure if it was called the Bender JCC at the time, on a regular basis. I must have been there every week for 3 years at least, in a variety of different programming. So in certain ways, I'm back in Washington to my roots. But more recently, I've been working in the Federation field for about 18 years now. 3.5 years here, 13 years in Boston, and 2 years prior to that in Cleveland. But interestingly, I did not think when I was younger that professionally I was going to work for the Jewish community. In fact, I used to be a business school professor. So I went out to Cleveland to teach at Case Western in the business school there. And I thought that that was my interest, except that I came to realize that I was doing some work on the side in the Jewish community in Cleveland, enjoying that a lot more than my day job, and decided to make a switch. And as my wife would attest to, is probably one of the better decisions I've made with, definitely professionally, but in my life as well. So it's not been a straight path to Federation, but has definitely been a very good one over the past many years.
Excellent. Well, thanks for sharing that. I did not know that piece about all the time you've spent at the Bender JCC. That is, in a way, coming full circle back to your roots here in Washington. I'm struck by your story because I think so many Jewish communal leaders share a similar story, which is I never saw myself, doing it for a living, but sort of took an interesting path to get into the field. And so it's a familiar story for sure. This morning, I thought we would, before we sort of jump into the work of the Federation, and there is so much to talk about, particularly this year in terms of the Federation, the role the Federation has played in the Jewish community, in the broader community, and such a vital role. But I don't like to assume knowledge. Can we talk a little bit about what the role of the Federation is? I know every part of the country, the Federation has a slightly different role that it plays in terms of its approach to community. Right. And I thought we would start off, just give us a little bit of background, the role of the Jewish Federation of Greater Washington as you see it.
Yeah, so I believe that federations are and have been in a significant transition. So historically, federations were the central fundraising arm of a Jewish community, and in some places they still are. They gather the money from donors, distribute it out to agencies, and serve as that almost a fundraising department for the local Jewish community. The reality is that in many ways, that has not been the role for a lot of federations for the past several years, and particularly in Washington. While we still do that, we still raise significant dollars, about $20 million every year that we distribute out to the local community to support all these critical agencies like the JCC. The purpose of our existence is not simply to raise money. And I say this in a lot of circumstances. An organization that is seeking to prevent childhood hunger has to raise money. Their goal is not to raise money. Their goal is to address childhood hunger. And for a federation, if our goal is to build a vibrant, inclusive Jewish community, one of the things that we do is raise money to that endpoint. But our goal is not to simply raise money, is to build a vibrant, inclusive Jewish community. So when we think about federation today, what we are constantly doing is thinking about where are we as a Jewish community, what are the challenges that we are facing, and what are the opportunities that are in front of us over the next several months and years, and then how do we bring together all forms of resources, human resources, organizational resources, financial resources, et cetera, to address those issues. And so that is when we start looking at the federation with the goal in mind of this vibrant Jewish life, then you see all the different pieces. And so when I look at federation, that is the question that we are constantly asking ourselves. What's the vision for the Jewish community? And how do we bring together all of the different tools at our disposal to be able to get there?
You know, it's interesting as you're sharing that perspective and the role of the Jewish Federation. I'm thinking about everything that the Federation does for the Bender JCC, and not just about resources, but bringing issues to the table and convening the community around important issues. And I think that piece has been critical. I know in my short time here, I've seen that that role that the Federation plays. In advance of our interview, I was perusing the website a little bit, and I wanted to read a piece because I think it kind of captures something really interesting about the role the Federation does play in terms of how you see the Federation. We mobilize community builders and organizations to identify and develop solutions to our community's greatest challenges. We serve as a hub to generate the kind of innovation and big thinking needed to guide our community to a vibrant future. And I think in so many ways, in my short time in the greater Washington area, I've seen the Federation play that role and continue to play that role as we all grapple with quite an unusual and challenging year. It's hard to hold any JChats during this time without sort of digging into what it's like to lead an organization or to be involved in the community through the pandemic and everything that has really has had tremendous impact on so many levels. Let's get a little personal in terms of you at the helm as the CEO of the Jewish Federation during this time. What are some things that you've learned about yourself and your own sort of leadership through this? I mean, no one could ever have planned or trained or prepared for a year like this.
Yeah, I mean, this past year, and I mean, now, I mean, it's more than a year because it was the weekend of March 15th that, you know, the JCC shut down and we all went remote. And at the time, I think I know from the Federation side, we thought, okay, 2, 4, 6, 8 weeks, we'll be back in the office. We had no idea. I mean, we, in many ways, were incredibly naive about, you know, what was going to happen. And so I think that was the part of the context. In terms of my own learning, and it's partly about, you know, me and partly about the organization, the Jewish community, is really the depth of, well, let me start with the Jewish community and the people I've worked with. The level of creativity and energy and passion and flexibility that I've seen over the past 13 months is beyond, I think, most people's imagination. I mean, people have been asking questions and responding in ways to challenges that, as you said, none of us even imagined we would have to face professionally. And that has been something that I think is true nationally and is absolutely true locally. I mean, the leadership here, lay and professional, has really been outstanding. On my side, I think that what I've tried to do and what I've learned more about myself is trying to keep an eye on the future. Yes, we need to respond, and what's the immediate and how do we deal with that? But what are the big questions that are being asked, and how do we keep on bringing our moment that we're in right now into those big questions? And I've seen in my own leadership, and what we've been trying to do is to understand all those particular immediate challenges, but within a vantage point of where are we going in a year, 5 years, 10 years now, so that when we come out of this, we are a stronger community. And I know that when I look back at what I've been able to do over the past year, besides working with a wide variety of people and learning so much from everyone, has been also to ask those questions and to really keep that in mind, so that we're solving issues not just for today and not just for next month, but for next year and beyond. And so that's been for me a significant learning and focus.
And that really resonates with me. And I know just conversations with colleagues in the community around sort of an evolving pandemic and addressing the sort of imminent needs, that lie in front of us, at the same time not getting sort of stuck in that zone, because God willing, point will get beyond, and we need to sort of be ready to embrace what that looks like, moving forward. And I think, just from my vantage point, the Federation has brought the community together around really important issues, including diversity, equity, and inclusion. I know we both participate in a wonderful racial justice launchpad program that has brought Jewish leaders from around the community, lay leaders, and as well as professionals, to address these important issues. And I know anti-poverty is also something that the Federation is spending a lot of time thinking about, and holding lots of conversations with community members to try to understand the role the Federation plays moving forward. So it kind of segues to one of the other questions I wanted to address, which was one of the tools that has really helped me was the study that the Jewish Federation of Greater Washington conducted with Brandeis, to try to sort of get a sense, where is the community right now in terms of dealing with the pandemic? What are the challenges? Some of the challenges existed before and have been just accentuated through the pandemic, but I know there's a lot of high-level conversations around that. Tell us a little bit more about what we've learned about our community, where people are, and what the next steps to addressing the challenges are.
Yeah, so even before the most recent study, in 2017, through the Morningstar Foundation, we did a study with Brandeis. It was more of a general population study to understand who we are, where do we live, how do we engage, and we learned a lot about the community in a wide variety of ways, in particular the rapid growth of the Greater Washington Jewish community. And I think that that's been one part. We were not a city that was created really 100 years ago as a port city, more like Baltimore or Cleveland or Detroit. We are a post-World War II Jewish community, and with significant growth. I mean, you can see kind of all the economic growth in this region, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a magnet city for young people, and increasingly for families with children. That was kind of a context for it. When COVID hit and the recession hit, we wanted to understand the impact that it was having on segments of the Jewish community and the response of the Jewish community to the needs of the local population. And so we worked with Brandeis as part of a national study. I think there were around 10 different cities that participated. And we were not that radically different in what we saw, though we have different segments. And COVID, and as we know nationally, COVID and the recession hit different parts of the community in very different ways. For some people, their lives were inconvenienced. They had to work from home, but they were okay by and large. Financially, they were okay. The mental health, they were okay. People weren't necessarily impacted with the disease, or if they did, they recovered. And that's actually a significant segment of the Jewish community. But there are others, young people, some families with young children who now had their kids at home with them, people who lost their jobs, who are deeply struggling and had a very hard time economically, emotionally, et cetera. And so from our side as a federation, and then working with many organizations in the community, we really wanted to elevate the idea that just because, I may not be experiencing it in the full depth, it doesn't mean that that's not the case for someone else. So even if my whole network of friends is experiencing in a certain way, that there's significant segments of the Jewish community that are really struggling and that are facing significant economic and emotional challenges. And that we will have to be thinking about this both during the pandemic and recession and coming out of it, whether it's teenagers or young adults or I was recently in a conversation with a colleague whose child, they were going to go to an outdoor restaurant and just didn't want to go because there were so many people and the discomfort being around a lot of people. And how do we understand the trauma that people have been going through? That study, which was conducted actually in the summer, started highlighting it and should push each one of us to ask the questions, not just about our own experiences or those that we know, but what is going on for other people, and understanding that there is a wide variety of experiences within the Jewish community and beyond in terms of the impact of COVID and the economic recession.
Right. One of the interesting questions that sort of come up for our leadership and thinking about, social action has become something we have found to be extremely meaningful this year for the Bender JCC, and it has activated volunteers, of all ages to get involved. And one of the programs we're working on is delivering meals to students who are in Montgomery County whose family cannot make it to a food distribution site, but have great need in their families. So the buses deliver, we package the food with our volunteers, we deliver it. The buses show up here. In fact, they were here this morning. It's unbelievable, like 12 buses showing up.
Wow.
And we load the buses and they get delivered to all these areas in Montgomery County. We're serving, I think, 130 families right now who receive really like a weekend's worth of meals and food. And one of the things that we've thought a lot about is sort of in thinking about the Jewish Community Center, what does that community piece really mean? At the Federation, there's also conversations about the role, and I think you sort of hinted at this, of sort of what role does the Jewish community play in the larger community? Something we're thinking a lot about. I don't know if you had any thoughts around that particular issue.
Yeah, so I think the issue that you raise is really important for every Jewish organization. I mean, as we think about the Jewish community, how do we support the needs within the Jewish community? And what is our responsibility as a Jewish community within the broader context, within the world in which we live? When we revised the Federation vision statement now 2.5 years ago, we added a line that talked about acting as a force for good in the world. What does that mean? What does that mean as a Jewish community, our responsibility beyond? And so it's something that we've been thinking about quite extensively and that we're going to continue working on and focusing on. We know, for example, that the number of people in need in this region has grown dramatically, right? I mean, the Capital Area Food Bank provides, serving 600,000 families each month in this region alone. We know also within the Jewish community, the number of people who need cash assistance for food or rent, et cetera, has increased dramatically. And so this question is a very big one. So as we look at this, whether it is the JCC or day schools or Federation or the many organizations, I mean, JFGH and JESA that are also providing critical services within the larger region, that's pretty significant. And so for Good Deeds Week, so this year, as opposed to last year where we tried to have Good Deeds Day, which was a day of service, this year it was converted into a week but more distributed and virtual. We have 60 plus organizations who are partnering with us, and the focus is on food insecurity. And it's about how do we, as a Jewish community, help and both educate and address the need around food insecurity within the broader region. And so our goal there is to highlight an issue, to make sure that people understand what it is and why it's important and why it's ongoing, and then also do something about it, hopefully not just for this 1 week, but on an ongoing basis, just like you are doing through the JCC. And so that is really at the core. I believe that increasingly this will be an important part of what we do as a Jewish community, and really kind of thinking through collectively what are those efforts that we need to undertake, to address, I said, the needs both within the Jewish community and within the broader society in which we live.
Makes total sense. And one of the things that I've noticed is around some of these big issues that we're dealing with, both as a Jewish community and as a larger community, is that and again, before COVID, obviously the Federation convened these important conversations. But I think now my sense is, as a new person in town, is that there is really, as illustrated by the meetings that the Federation convenes with colleagues every couple of weeks around the community. I know we have heads of schools, of the Jewish day schools and the JCCs and Hillels and camps coming together regularly on Zoom, but really connecting around shared challenges and also thinking about addressing challenges of the future together. And I think from my 4 months on the job, I see that as a real strength in our community.
Yeah, it's so, I mean, something that we know in general, like when there's trust, when there are good relationships, the opportunities are unlimited, right? I mean, we know this one-on-one with a friend or a colleague in any context, right? If you have trust, if you believe in each other, then we can do, so much work than otherwise. And one of the things that we have done, I mean, we've always been gathering together in various ways, but particularly with COVID, and it started every week, kind of how do we respond? What do we do? Over time, it went to every other week. The depth of the relationships and the confidence in each other as a community has really grown. And so, and that is, being shown in a variety of different, kind of partnerships and collaborations that are occurring across all different parts of the community. And I firmly believe that that is and it will be a hallmark of the Washington Jewish community, where, in theory, we could live in silos and operate independently and not work with each other. But what we have seen and what we're building on now more and more is when we do work together, when we talk about our issues and challenges as a group, we can figure out new solutions that otherwise wouldn't be there. And so the overall strength then of the Washington Jewish community grows when we have stronger ties to each other and are willing to work in collaboration with each other in a deeper way. And that for me is one of the most exciting parts of, when people say, what do you want to keep or what do you want to leverage kind of post-COVID? For me, this is probably number one, because, you can say I want this program or that program. Well, those, diminish over time. But if you have trust, if you have relationships, then anything is possible.
Absolutely. And, we're coming up to the end of our time together. And I wanted to just, thank you for your leadership, particularly this year through the pandemic, and your team, and for, bringing us together around important conversations, supporting our work on such a high level. And so I appreciate your time and perspective today. And we'll have to bring you back because there's so much more that we can talk about. We're here with Gil Preuss, the Chief Executive Officer of the Jewish Federation of Greater Washington. Gil, thank you so much for your time this morning, and we'll do it again soon.
Thank you. Absolutely.
All right. Be well.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you.